We'll be back from the break, still watching Smart Mates Business, your daily kickstarter for the day. Well, it's yet another very cold morning. Started quite a heavy notice of the rains, and businesses around, most especially I think in the downtown, are really facing it rough. And the traffic is also quite so horrible around the major busy trading areas in Kampala. But of course, we're here on Smart Mates Business to drive this, despite what business has to keep moving. Well, at exactly 7 minutes past 8, let's get into our business tips and quotes. But of course, before we get there, don't forget the markets on the Zabu platform, which will be opening at 8:15. Yes, today. What are you waiting for? *292# is simply the USSD code, which will avail you with quite lots of those options. You can choose to buy government bonds and securities for as little as 15,000 Uganda shillings. Yes, but you can choose still to invest more than that. Though Zabu simply says start with 15,000. Now 8:15 a.m. till 3:15 p.m. East African time, Monday up to Friday, except on the weekends and the public holidays when you actually can't find these markets. But at least you have the rest of the 5 days to capitalize and make quite very huge amounts of profit. And maybe the question is, why should I buy bonds? Well, side income, side hustle, it could be one of the ways to fight the poverty rates in Uganda when you trade in stocks. That even probably things may not go well your way and you lose your job, but your stocks will be paying you. Zabu says my money, my future, and Alltech East Africa says do something new. And now let's get into our business tips and quotes. Well, probably well, that is it for the business tips and quotes. Yes, hope you've been inspired, and this would be something very beneficial as an upcoming young entrepreneur, very vigilant and vibrant about that. And now let's cross over to what's trending on social media, and it's having some business concept in it. Yes, now social media trends this morning. This is at Jumia, of course, talking about the East African community. 15th meeting for the East African Community Sectoral Council on Finance and Economic Affairs is currently underway at East African headquarters in Arusha. Yes, in Arusha, Tanzania. There, that is at Jumuiya. Yes, still at Jumuiya, with oil reserves discovered in Uganda and Kenya, natural gas in Tanzania, exports and crude oil, that is by South Sudan, and ongoing exploration in Burundi and Rwanda. East Africa is one of the world's most promising frontiers for oil and gas exploration and development. This is at the East African community at Jumuiya there. Now here at Africa Fact Zone, Tanzania's President Samia Suluhu Hassan's key reforms, of course, include the anti-corruption investigations, they grew the economy by 15 billion US dollars in 2 years, and of course lifted bans on opposition rallies, and so many other related concepts regarding that. Yes, still at this is at Africa View Facts. It says that Tanzania ranked as the most beautiful country in Africa and fourth in the world in terms of natural wonder. Now, according to a study conducted, that is by Money, a UK travel website. Now, Tanzania's remarkable natural landscapes and diverse wildlife were largely recognized. This is at CD ZAS. This is with all due respect. Now, Tanzania's economy has grown from $69.7 billion in 2021 to that is $85.42 billion in 2023. That is under female President Samia Suluhu Hassan, younger than Akufo Addo. Wow. Now, this is at SACGOT. Tanzania's avocado sector is a new big thing. Now, the numbers about potential speak for themselves. Today, we witnessed the launch of the very first Tanzania avocado guideline by the Minister of Agriculture, that is Honorable Hussein Bashe. Now, the guideline aims at creating a robust and competitive Tanzania avocado industry, and CSL is committed to ensure that is possible. Now, this is at Mr. Guantai. Every single time I see a tweet on the horrors of that is of traveling through Tanzania by road as a Kenyan, I'm convinced never to step foot in that country as a driver. And then this is at Karo Mbega. Says it's encouraging that President Samia Suluhu's government aims to increase Tanzania's export value, that is from $1.2 billion to $5 billion US dollars by 2030. Now, this will boost Tanzania's international trade and create new opportunities for the local businesses. Well, now heading into our of course, our update too on our social media, of course, on our SMB trends here. Of course, there is quite a very huge concern regarding unemployment, which has really steadily been on the very high rise for the past 3 years in the country, Uganda, due to uncertainties that hit the economy. But definitely, despite all that, there are always hopes that the public tries to put a demand, it puts onto the responsible stakeholders, and now most especially when it comes to the parliament, in terms of reviewing what is the way forward. And now 2023-2024 budget framework is already out there, and quite priorities being listed there, with the parish development model being one of the key sectors being looked at when it comes to generation of more jobs. Now, definitely, there are quite lots of questions that come about. What is the budgeter's approach? The budget financial year 2023-2024, what is its approach to providing employment opportunities? Now, I'm joined with Joram this very morning as we have further discussions about this. Very good morning, Joram.
Yes, good morning.
Yeah, very good. How is the morning? It's quite
very cold.
The rains.
Very cold, I should say.
Yeah.
And to our dear viewers, good morning.
Yeah.
I hope you are well as on your side. It's a cold one within Kampala and neighboring districts,
everywhere.
by the way.
Yeah.
But anyways, I think we're good to go in regards to what we have for you today.
Exactly.
And speaking of unemployment, speaking of pretty much Uganda's labor sector, I should say.
Labor sector. And by the way, I feel like there are worries which I think also is trying to escalate. Yesterday, there was a report, I think it was in an element on the New Vision, about job cuts in the Ministry of Works. And today I read a report about the government denying a decree regarding job cuts. and I remember last week when we talked about the massive global layoffs, which have been happening around the country. And, with the rising unemployment rates already, there are people who are already out there still looking for work. And such reports are being put out there. I can imagine the pressure and the tension that comes on along. But, of course, when we tried, not so many people have really come out to discuss this matter. The budget's 2023-2024, its approach towards employment.
Exactly.
I don't know really why, and some actually stakeholders regarding this, saying that, that is something we cannot talk about right now. But the Ugandans, these are the people that are putting hope into, So 2023, financial 2023-2024 financial budget. Let's take a look at the approach when it comes to the job creation. Now, according to a report here, we see that to avert slowdown in economic growth, Finance Ministry says the overall objective of the financial year 2023-2024 budget strategy is to restore economy back to the medium-term growth path of 6 to 7% per annum and improve the economy's competitiveness. Now, Joram, just to put a note on that point, the private sector definitely is one of the key answers when it comes to this, empowering the private sector. Yep. I saw something about the capital markets of Kenya putting some sort of, according to the amount of share capital you put out there, you are entitled to some sort of, a tax incentive for the first 3 years, 3 to 5 years of listing your company. And, when you empower the stock market, let's take a look at countries which have stable stock markets, and you look at the employment rate of those countries. It's quite a little bit okay, because the reason is why, of course, we know why companies don't want to have staff, the costs of production, and which is attributed to revenues. But when you have potential sources of revenues, like people buying stocks, you are in position to invest further, and when you invest further, you're empowering, you're opening up an extra branch and all that. I've also realized, actually, Joram, that companies don't really, to a bigger extent, 40% of the revenues companies earn. When we look at countries with a stable financial market climate, they seem to be if I may say, companies, 40% of the revenues companies generate them from stocks. Because I want you to take a look at a scenario that sometimes the face value of your company commands a price on the stock market.
True.
You may not be necessarily performing better, but the face value you keep out there, and once that money comes in, you're able to sustain your staff. So that means you're going to need to expand more, and once you empower them, well, taxes are available for you to run the economy. I think this is the high time as African nations we really take a look, because I'm relating it to the IMF consideration of cutting budget by 36%. And now all these are strategies, because some of these funds that come in are used to develop projects that create employment. Now we are assuming they are no longer there, So that means the individual's hope now stays in the governments.
Well, of course, even when you look at the fact that here in Uganda, when President Museveni on the Labour's Day celebrations assured Ugandans that there are jobs that are going to be created
by the PDM,
it's because you realize at times the hopes of many turn to the government, especially in countries, in African countries where job opportunities are minimal.
Very true.
So that means when people fail to create their own, they will then have to turn to the government, because now you realize at times if you yourself have failed, that means the resources available can't support you.
Then
true. Maybe the government can have an answer for some of those. And ideally, in most cases, I think, like you mentioned, when we are heading into the national budget, it is very rare for us to have a sideline budget for creating job opportunities.
Job opportunities, yeah.
And obviously, there is a budget that creates an environment that is secure for anyone to create, let's say, their own job or find a job. For example, if the funding or the allocation that goes to the Ministry of Defense, for example, is to create room for security in the country, then there is one that goes to the Ministry of Health to make sure that at least we are having at least safety and health awareness is priority. But then also, as we continue to have a look at this kind of discussions, you want to understand what plan does the government have
Perfect.
for
That's-
the growing masses, because when we look at the parish development model, have we got the time to first of all look at its implementation, because it was rolled out in the current financial year. That means the current financial year is coming to an end next month, 30th. Again, the question is, once it comes to an end on the 30th of June, how has it fared?
Exactly.
Have we looked back and realized how it has fared? Because now when you look at the budget approach and the employment opportunities come the next financial year, you get to realize that the Ministry of Finance in the budget framework paper for the next financial year, in the medium term, increasing the wealth of households and eliminating poverty, particularly using the parish development model, and SMEs economic recovery programs is key for socio-economic transformation. And in addition, diversifying the economy and Uganda's exports are also key to achieving the planned economic growth trajectory. Besides that, there are also plans that the private sector is posed to be one of the key sectors whose issues will be addressed and funded in the national budget come the next financial year, in case the budget framework paper is approved. So you as well look at it in that in the upcoming financial year, the Finance Ministry is proposing to increase the private sector development budget allocation to 1.798 trillion. I think, again, why we look at the private sector is because most of the economies, especially an economy like ours, which is free, a free economy kind of situation, that is ideally moving like a capitalistic...
definitely, capitalist. Yeah.
So when you look at the capitalism world that we are in, you realize that it's more profit-oriented. That means the private sector has a huge platform to thrive.
Very true.
And in that instance, government has to put more efforts in supporting the private sector. And when you're supporting the private sector, one of the key sectors that you need to support in the private sector is the service sector.
Service sector, very
because
true.
Services generate quite a number of income. And at the end of it all, when you're pushing into the service sector, this is where you see the financial institutions coming in. This is almost most of the businesses in Uganda, besides those under the SMEs, but in the private sector, those that form up the formal or the corporate world are mainly into services.
Very true.
They offer services for an income. And so adding this or adding more efforts in supporting the private sector. Now, an allocation here of 1.798 trillion in the next financial year, and it's actually something that you would definitely feel. It is indeed a very huge boost to the private sector players and how much the government is willing to support.
Well, that is very interesting. I think I always believe it's a collaborative effort.
Sure.
You work hand in hand with the government are working hand in hand with the private sector. Unlike, by the way, you'll be amazed in countries like America. The thing that government really does is to create a favorable environment, but it's rare for it to fund, to get money that, let this money be injected in investment. No, it creates a favorable climate, here, because even government funding at some point can be unsustainable, by the way, if you get to look at things, because demands always keep growing. But that's why you need the numbers, the investors, you need the numbers to bring in the money, which will be, but if you don't create the rightful atmosphere, the burden is coming back to you as the government, Let me give you a scenario. China was one of the first countries to develop 5G.
True.
And do you know why? The government was in position to inject about $600 billion. The reason why the United States of America delayed was because government can't get that amount of money to inject it.
So the private sector has to push themselves.
To push them. So you can see that. Anyway, it's a bit advantage, but I was just trying to bring out that aspect of a government reaching an extent of trusting the private sector that it can actually do this.
Yeah.
And that is what we need for our country, Uganda. Well, Smart Mates Business, your daily Kickstarter for the day. It's 25 minutes past 8. Yes, the markets on the Zabo platform have already opened as I speak right now, just 11 minutes back. So *292# is the USSD code for you there. And you'll be availed with quite lots of options where you can buy government bonds and securities for as little as 15,000 Ugandan shillings. But you can still choose to invest more. But Zabu simply says start with 15,000. Now markets open at 8:15 and they close at 3:15 p.m. East African time, effective Monday up to Friday. except on the weekends and the public holidays when you can't actually access these markets. But at least you have the rest of the 5 days to capitalize and make quite some huge profits for you. Zabu just made this a reality. There is no excuse as to why you're not owning a government bond with such an opportunity for you to earn a side income. Zabu says, my money, my future, and All Texas East Africa says, do something new. And now let's get into a short commercial break, and when we return, more business discussions. Good morning.
Smart24